Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Before we get started, this is the trigger warning. This is it. This is the point of no return. We're going to be talking about messed up things and dark things and horror culture, scary things. So there will be discussions about anything from murder, rape, child abuse, bad language, all that fun stuff, if that's all your fun stuff and your cup of tea. Otherwise, go listen to something else boring.
Go away.
Yeah.
But if you do want to hear that,
tune in. Today's guest is Ashen Jackal, director, editor, and cinematographer, best known for his YouTube channel with all kinds of awesome stuff there, and shorts like Manto and The Red Room Curse. And I had never heard of Manto before, and I gotta say, that is an awesome idea. I've been trying to think of stories like that recently, like something that would be semi-commonplace around the world, and the whole just being in a bathroom, either a public bathroom or, like you said, like a large enough house party, and there's a knock at the door. It's just something that happens to you in a day-to-day life that you can turn into something scary. I like that. Anyway, rant over. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how's everyone doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
So in this interview, we'll be asking 3 sets of questions covering your childhood, your teenage years, and adulthood. We come at it from these multiple directions just because doing so sometimes triggers memories that you'd forgotten, but that's not meant to be a therapy session. So if there's anything that you don't want to talk about, just say pass and we'll move on. But starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
Well, I've always been afraid of ghosts, and thus the dark has kind of always terrified me. Mm-hmm. And my father was the type of person who he would, if it bothered me, he would ensure it would happen. So if I wanted a nightlight or like a fan in my room to help keep me calm or something, forget about that. You're sleeping in the cold, quiet dark. So
Dad, why are you tacking up large black blankets over the windows? Because you wanted light.
Sink or swim?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good method.
Yeah, but so like I always had this kind of innate fear of ghosts, and as I grew up, it became more evident why, because I'm somebody who has had a lot of experiences with ghosts in my life, and I know a lot of people don't believe in them, and that's perfectly fine. It's better not to believe in them if you don't have to deal with stuff like that. But for me, as a kid, a lot of stuff happened to me, kind of traumatized me. And then as you grow older and you learn to compartmentalize things, you learn how to sort through it, and it becomes less scary.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, just focusing on childhood, at the moment at least, what were some of the scary things that happened? If you want to talk about them.
Now, here's the thing. My childhood is a bit of a blur.
Okay.
I don't remember too many specific things. Probably one of the biggest, scariest things to ever happen to me as a kid that I can still remember that I haven't sort of blocked out yet was I watched Prince of Darkness at a pretty young age. And that movie scared the crap out of me. I was afraid to go near mirrors after after watching that movie. That cold end where he goes to touch the mirror and then they cut off before you can see what's going to happen. Oh my goodness, that was really terrifying. The other stuff that happened to me as a kid would mostly be at night in the dark, and I would just like hear things moving, and I don't hear whispers and stuff like that. And it never amounted to anything. And of course, when I was a kid, I would do the hide under the blanket, because that's going to protect me from whatever's out there thing.
Right? Like, isn't there a certain irony to that? Like, you're afraid of the dark, so you get under the blanket, which is still in the dark. And if anything, even more so in the dark. I guess it's your own personal isolated darkness, so it's better. Somehow.
Now imagine somebody who has dealt with that as a child, hiding under the blankets to stay away from ghosts. Now imagine going to see the American version of The Grudge And then having that one scene where she comes out from under the blanket, the one place you're supposed to be safe,
Right.
and grabs the girl screaming under the blanket into, the ghosty abyss, I guess.
I think that's exactly why they went with it. I don't know. Maybe it was in the original Japanese story, but
I don't recall it being... Well, no, they might have done that in the original, actually. It was just, not quite as stylized, I don't think.
yeah. But still, that's a way of breaking that boundary. Like nowhere is safe. Like, oh, you think under the covers is safe? No, they're there too.
And then, of course, they came out with the sequel, and the kid's like hiding in a hoodie, and she's inside of the hoodie and snatches him. And at that point, it's like laughable. It's like, I've given up on being afraid of this.
It's like the puddles in Poltergeist 3.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'd forgotten all about that until you mentioned that.
Yeah, they were in a building
Yeah.
in that one. It was in mirrors.
Yeah.
Lots of them.
Did you have anybody in your life who was a fan of horror? Friends, family, relatives at that age?
I still don't have many people in my life that are a fan of horror. It's like impossible to find people. I don't understand. But I've never really had people around that enjoy horror. For me, it's always, like ever since I was a kid, I just sort of found it. That was sort of my escapism. Some people, obviously I'm into comic books and stuff like that too. But the first thing I was into was like horror movies and stuff to kind of get through life, I guess.
The things that you were talking about a minute ago, whether it's paranormal experiences or Prince of Darkness and things like that, did any of those experiences trigger any lasting behaviors in your life? Like phobias or OCD?
No. It's more like a roller coaster ride, after you realize, after you grow up a little bit from being a little kid that's just been traumatized for a horror movie, and you realize that it's more of a thrill watching something like that because you're going on this journey and you're going to survive, then it either becomes interesting or it becomes thrilling. And so that's kind of how I've always felt about horror and scary things that happen to me. Even later in my life, when I would see full-on apparitions and stuff, I was more interested than anything else.
That kind of ties in with the next thing I wanted to ask you, which was, so for a lot of kids, there's like a line that gets crossed where usually, or at least often, the first experiences of horror really are scary. And then later experiences, you end up understanding that they're meant to be entertainment, but maybe the first things that you see aren't. You don't understand that. And I was going to ask, where was there a dividing line for you, or was it always entertainment from the very start? Like, how did that work out for you?
Well, after surviving Prince of Darkness, it was pretty much, viewed more as entertainment after that. I would still get, some things would still skeeve me out. I remember when Blair Witch came out and they built this up as like a real event. Mm-hmm. And they did that whole like thing where they were playing it off as actual, not some kind of fake event, but sort of like something that's just been released to the public.
Right.
And when I saw that the first time, that kind of freaked me out a little because that sort of blurred the line. But aside from that, horror has been just sort of a thrill ride for me.
Did you see Blair Witch in your early years or teen years? Where would you classify that?
Well, I was born in 84, so whenever that came out, I don't remember exactly when it was. I was probably 12 or 13 at the time.
Okay. So like on the cusp border, maybe.
Yeah.
Did you participate in Halloween as a kid?
Oh, all the time. I loved Halloween. I still love Halloween. My daughter loves Halloween, So.
Favorite costume?
Oh, man. When I was a kid, of course, I would love to dress up as a ninja. Mm-hmm. Ninjas were really big in the 80s, and the early 90s.
Super Mutant Ninja Turtles.
And
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
No, like Ninja Turtles were fine and all, but I was into like there was a bunch of ninja movies out back then, like American Ninja and all this type of stuff. I was really into that genre, the like sort of Japanese American ninja hybrid movies.
So did you go with like the classic black ninja outfit, or was it like American white ninja?
Yeah, no, the classic black ninja outfit. I've always been a little tubby, so I wanted to wear the one that was a little bit more
forgiving. Yeah,
black is a slimming color. Yeah. But I always noticed that, like, I don't know, I guess things like that weren't thought of as more taboo back then or whatever. But they'd always have like the white dude, the standard white guy who knows no martial arts, but he fakes it well enough. And he was always the one who wore the white ninja outfit or like the red ninja outfit. It's like,
Yeah.
you don't get the black one.
It's like G.I. Joe, Snake.
Like,
Right.
on retrospect, those movies were terrible, but as a young, like slightly preteen or teenager.
Oh, they were awesome.
Yeah, they were something to behold. People flipping around and fighting and explosions. Why not, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have a least favorite costume?
There was one year where I just kind of threw some stuff together. It was around the end of me going trick-or-treating personally.
Mm.
And I called it the guy who hits Pikachu with a pan. And I just put on some random face paint and like a clown wig. And I had a Pikachu doll and I had a pan and I would just hit it with the pan. And they're like, is this a character from a show? And I'm like, no, it's not a character from a show. I just,
Give me candy.
I just made it up.
whatever.
Yeah. I got this Pikachu here. I'm going to hit it with a pan. What do you got? Give me the candy.
So that was the last hurrah of trick-or-treating for me.
Okay.
Did you
Last ditch effort.
Did you have any reoccurring dreams when you were a kid?
There was this one dream I had where there was this house on a hill and everything was always very happy. There was an old woman there and I would go to visit her and I would feel so happy. I knew I was in a dream and I would tell her that I don't want to wake up. I don't want to go back out into the world. I want to stay here with you. And that one I had probably 3, 4, 5 times, something like that. The last time it felt so powerful when I woke up, I was so disappointed. And then after that, I never had the dream again.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anything you want to talk about in terms of what you maybe were feeling like you wanted to escape from or something? Like in real life?
I mean, my life was kind of crap growing up. So, pretty much I guess that's why horror has always been escapism to me, because I always felt like a monster. So I could empathize with, all these monsters going around killing all these people who've had it way too easy in life.
That's kind of interesting. Why did you feel like the monster?
Because I was treated like one.
Oh, wow.
It's almost like they were trying to make me into one. But when it came to my mother and my father, I grew up saying, I'm not going to be like them. I'm going to be better than them. It was one of those ones where, you could have easily have taken on the personality traits of your parents and become a terrible person. But instead, I chose to be better than them and try to accomplish more in my life. So,
okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah. Nice twist.
that's why, you guys ever seen the movie Tetsuo the Iron Man, Tetsuo Body Hammer, Tetsuo Bullet Man, any of those movies?
Seen the first one. I still need to watch the other two.
Yeah. So in the first one, it's a metaphysical film. The movie is actually about the director and the abuse he suffered as a child. And, he's turning into this metal machine as a coping mechanism for everything that he's been through.
Right.
And then at the end of the film, he destroys the world. Him and his brother sort of fuse together and they set out on a mission to destroy the world. So that was his statement at that point in his life. Then you go on to the second movie and he has a family. It's basically the same story being told over again, but this time the main character has a family. And in the film, he's given this ultimate power to destroy the world and everything, and he does, but the people to survive are him and his family. And then the third movie, once again, retells the same story, but a little different. Main protagonist has a family, right? And the one thing you'll notice in each of these films is the director is also the antagonist. He views himself as the monster. And in the third movie, they fuse together and the protagonist accepts the fact that that monster lives inside of him and moves on with life without destroying everything. He lives with his family and he lets the world be and just becomes a better person for the experience. So, like, that's one of the things that I've always, like, that trilogy in particular, I've always, like, you can see him recreating who he is in every single new film that he's been through. And, and that mirrors the kind of struggle and choices and stuff that I went through, from being angry about everything to getting in a relationship and then to having a family and, realizing that I have to be the strong one regardless of, what I've been through and stuff. So, but, it's just pretty cool that you can see, somebody like that, a director, Shinya Tsukamoto, putting out stuff like that that's very personal, although you can view it from you don't have to view it that way. You don't have to view it from the metaphysical sense. You can just accept it as a story. But then again, you can, dig deep and realize that this is a deep and personal, story he's telling and retelling at every phase in his life.
Yeah, it's like an autobiographical metaphor almost.
You've mentioned a couple different things from Japanese culture. Did you get introduced that in your childhood, or did that come later in teen years?
I had, when I was pretty young, I had a Japanese friend, and that really interested me in Japanese culture because it was so different. And then I went on to study the language in school and study a lot of aspects of Japanese culture because I was always interested in going over there. I'm a little bit into anime, but not like super into it there because I'm like really particular about what I watch. But, so there's all that. And of course, one thing that I love is the different mythologies, the urban legends that have been created in the past and the future, and finding out about that. Just really inspiring to see how they develop their urban legends and how they're different from like the stuff we create here in America.
Yeah.
Anything scary happened to you in real life that you can remember in your childhood? Get hit by a car, kind of thing.
Let's see. There's
maybe some of the paranormal encounters you mentioned.
there has been, that didn't happen so much in my childhood though. I was like scaredy cat back then. But in my childhood, I almost died 3 times.
Oh.
One time I was at the top of a staircase at my grandmother's house, and I was literally about 1 or 2 steps down, and this was a big staircase. I slipped because it was a carpeted staircase. I flipped head over heels and then back down to my feet, and I landed at the bottom.
On your feet.
And I have no idea how I did a perfect flip like that, head over heels flip, and landed on my feet at the bottom. So that was pretty freaky. The second time I almost died was I was on a bicycle at the top of the hill in that same house because there's a huge hill that led straight down. The cars would scrape every time they would go up the driveway because it was so steep. And I slipped one day while I was going to get on the bike. My stomach landed on the bicycle and I went speeding down the hill, and a car was coming barreling ahead, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm dead, right? This car is just going to hit me. They're not going to see me speeding down the hill and whatever. But fortunately, the car did stop, and then I hit the road, bounced up, and then flew into a tree. And I survived. And my friend, who's at the top of the hill, came running down laughing at me, and the guy in the car was like, is everyone okay?
Right? You and your friend are laughing your asses off, and the guy in the car is like, what is happening? Why are you laughing?
Well, literally the whole world was spinning because I went flying off this bike. But so I didn't know if I was going to be alive or dead or whatever. Everything was just motion, Now, the third time I was coming home with my grandparents, we had gone to the beach and we were coming home, and I was sitting in the back seat and I was playing Pokemon on my old Game Boy, like first gen Game Boy. And this highway has just 2 roads, one going this way and one going that way. And as we're driving, I get this weird sensation, like my spider sense was tingling, right? So I look up, and I see the grill of a semi about to come crashing into us.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 10, 15 feet from the front of our car. No way we could avoid this. We are going to die. To our left was another semi that was going to pass. And so it could not swerve to the left back into that lane. It was about halfway across that semi. So it couldn't get back to the left. I guess it was trying to pass the semi, and maybe it didn't notice us or whatever the case was going to be. And so I look up and everything's moving in like slow motion. My grandmother reaches across the car and grabs my grandfather's arm and says, "That's it." And as we're about to be, run over, flattened by this semi, it just vanishes. And all of us saw it. All of us knew that this was going to be the end. And even in my own head, I felt comfort in knowing that my time here was over. There was nothing more I had to worry about. And it was actually one of the most comforting experiences I ever had in my whole life. I felt like it's over. My job is done. And now I can go and be happy. And I felt at peace knowing that I was about to, be removed from this mortal coil. But then it didn't happen. The semi vanished. We looked back. It wasn't behind the other one. It didn't swerve off the road. It just was gone. So many years later, we discussed this because all of us experienced it. We're like, you guys saw that, right? And I'm not crazy.
Yeah, like there's group hallucinations and then there's group near-death experiences. That is something else.
Yeah, and so many years later on TV, there wasn't really internet at the time yet. My grandmother put on this show about road hauntings and about how stuff like this happens, where tragedies reenact themselves. And then, the ghost haunting disappears. It's not an intelligent haunting. It's just an event playing itself over and over again. Like any haunted house where you would hear footsteps every single night at the same time or whatever, stuff like that. So as far as I know, that may have been some kind of a haunting, or we could go into the more sci-fi direction, which is a theory I've developed about, multiple dimensions. And if you die in one dimension, you're still alive in another and your consciousness just sort of scoots over to there where you haven't died yet. But, you could take that in whatever direction you want.
Right.
But anyway, that's just, that's what I went through. I thought I was done for, and it turned out I wasn't.
That's some weird, scary shit. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the scariest stuff. That was just, it was impactful, but there has been some really scary stuff that's happened to me.
In your childhood or later on in life?
No, not my childhood.
Okay. So we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So for teenage years, what were some of the scary stories or books or movies that really influenced you in your teenage years?
Well, with my teenage years, things sort of quieted down on the front of Paranormal Activity from when I was a kid.
Okay.
I started, just kind of ignoring whatever. But when in my teenage years, probably the thing that freaked me out the most was The Grudge and The Ring. Those two movies were really impactful for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially The Grudge, just because it was so vague about where these people were being taken and about the mystery surrounding the house, and just thinking about evil spirits in that light. I've never thought, when I would think about ghosts, I would just sort of put them out of my mind. But now I have this movie here showing me, hey, maybe your fears about these things in the past were justified. So that really kind of, that movie really kind of shook me up.
I'm guessing because now they might actually do something rather than just scare you.
Exactly. I never thought about them as being able to do something after I got used to kind of having them around or whatever. So
they've been playing nice so far.
Yeah. And it all depends on where you go and stuff like that. Different, some houses are clean, some houses are very dirty. And, easily accessible to spirits. So you never know exactly what you're going to get. And eventually down the line, when I was in my 20s, I did experience something that was pretty hardcore. But at this point in my life, nothing like that had done anything significant to me. And but that film sort of made me a little more edgy.
Planted the seed.
About the things I would see and hear, whatever.
What about The Ring?
The Ring sort of played off on the fears of that, like really The Grudge was the prime thing that made me afraid, but the Ring really played on those same fears with like the haunted VHS tape and ghosts killing people, curses and all that kind of stuff. I never even really considered curses or anything like that until I watched the Grudge and the Ring, and then I'm like, oh, curses, death curses. That's something that I hadn't even considered before. So
they follow you,
Yeah.
Anything else jump out to you besides The Ring and the Grudge?
Not as far as things that scared me. Very few things scare me.
Okay.
By this time, I was really into horror, so it's like I was just jaded about feeling actually afraid of anything. So when I did hit those two movies, once again, it reignited that roller coaster of fear I felt back when I saw Prince of Darkness. It was the first time anything really got to me since then. And I think it really played on my existing fears of ghosts and stuff from before. So it hit a little too close to home for me.
Okay. To kind of look at the other side of the coin then, were there anything in your teen years that didn't scare you, but that you were enjoying in horror?
Oh, everything. I loved everything in horror. I was
like
watching
top three things that come to your mind.
Evil Dead would have to be one of my top three. Tetsuo the Iron Man would be one of my top three. And the third one, I don't know. They're just so probably. I don't know. I don't know what the third one would be. Those two were the big influences on me. Everything else kind of plays second fiddle to those two films and their influence on me.
Okay. Well, we already kind of talked about Tetsuo. What about what did you like about Evil Dead?
Evil Dead was a real grassroots type of a movie. It did a lot with a little. You could see how it's not clean and not, perfect, not pristine done. And what they accomplished with that movie, like men were wearing wigs in order to be women that couldn't be on the set that day, all that kind of stuff. And you find out about all the strife behind this movie and you see the finished product, and it's just very memorable, especially the camera angles that Sam Raimi did, really bringing that movie to life, just very creative. And that's why that movie stands out so much. And that was the movie that really inspired me to want to be a horror film director, because it just seems so real, so every man. So, like a real passion project, somebody with nothing going out there and putting what they could out for everyone to see, and having the, maybe not necessarily be the cleanest, most pretty film, but the passion behind it comes out. And that's what really is addictive about that movie, in my opinion, like the feel of it, the energy behind it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. It has that an almost personal grindhouse feel to it. Like, I don't know, not Hollywood. I can't think of a way to describe it.
As far away from Hollywood as you can get. Yeah.
Almost found footage before found footage was found footage, maybe, Right?
Yeah. It did have that real sort of documentary kind of feel to it in places.
Let me jump back up to childhood for a minute, because I realized that I forgot to ask that same question for childhood. In childhood, were there other horror-related things that maybe you didn't mention that you were more focused on your enjoyment of them rather than fear of them?
So after Prince of Darkness, I really got into the Aliens and the Predator films. I had a friend who was into them, and he had action figures and stuff. And they were some of the, aside from Prince of Darkness, they were some of the first movies that I got into that were horror or rated, or even sci-fi for that matter. So
what was it you liked about those?
I don't know. They were cool. They weren't necessarily scary for me. They were just like really cool. Like, the first Alien movie, it had so much atmosphere to it, and I don't know, it's like after Prince of Darkness, it was probably the most atmosphere I had seen in a movie since that, and just the claustrophobic nature of it and everything, just really cool. And and oddly enough, the third Alien movie, which is pretty much everyone's least favorite, turned out being my favorite, and is even still my favorite to this day. Not because it's the best one made, but because of the characters and the environment and all that kind of stuff,
Thank you. Yes, I am also a fan of 3. I know everybody hates it because they killed off Newt and Hicks in between the two films, but it was different. Plus, it was meant
to be the end, and so end, everyone dies. That's the thing. I don't think audiences were expecting. Like, this is the end. Nobody lives happy. Mm-hmm. Everyone dies. The story ends. Yeah,
they're just ripping those two band-aids off.
Yeah, real quick. It brought the horror back to the series after the action-y second one. This one was like, this one's real. This one's going to get down to the nitty-gritty. The weapons are gone. People are going to be slaughtered. And the one thing I always found hilarious about that film is there's this one prisoner who made a deal with God to live forever. And in the end of the movie, he's the only one to leave. So I always thought that was a pretty interesting touch, like this one guy mentions it, like, I made a deal with God, and then like he's the one to leave at the end. So.
Never realized that, but you're right.
Why is that funny to you?
It's just ironic that could be taken literally once you see him survive. Like, maybe he did make a deal with God.
Yeah.
Like, he's this horrible person. He's done terrible things, but he made a deal with God and he made it out. So,
Alien 3 was just a metaphor for the rapture.
Maybe.
When you said that you loved the characters and the environment in that, what did you mean by that?
I loved how like gritty the prisoners are in that film. Yeah. They just like, you can tell that they have this whole religious aspect going, but then just under the surface, those terrible people that they really are.
Yeah, they're all murderers and rapists that they're trying to reform. But I agree. Yeah, they also had really good character development on each one of them. It wasn't like nobody was really kind of ham-fisted in there as far as their characters went.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously some background characters and whatnot, but like some of them I was really sad to see die, especially the one guy who, remember that there's the one scene where they're going POV and the guy looks through the window and the mouth shoots through the door and it like breaks his head open like a pineapple.
Yep.
I was like, no, but the funny thing is, like, I don't know any of the characters by names, but I know them all by face, and I don't know if if that was intentional or not, but it's like they all had a very distinctive sort of look about them. They're all these bald guys, but they all acted in certain ways to make them distinct from each other. And, it's really cool, like a motley crew, and then trying to see these terrible people come together at the end to try and fight this alien and them just getting destroyed. Oh my goodness. It was like, talk about a plan not working out at all. But
do you remember why you wanted that one character to live?
I didn't want him to live. Oh. Like, I didn't care what happened to that guy. He was a coward. But the one guy I wanted to live was the guy that got his face broken open.
That's the guy I'm talking about.
Through the door. Oh, he was just sympathetic. He seemed like he was somebody who either learned his lesson or like maybe he was even wrongfully there. He just seemed like the type of person who he wanted to help everyone, and he was down for the good people and trying to accomplish their goals.
So he was one of the few good people in the cast.
Yeah,
exactly. He was one of the few good people in the cast. He never gave anyone like shit. He was always on the side of Ripley. So, he's and he was funny too. I think when the alien pulls the like whoever the warden guy, when the alien pulls him into the vent and like you just see stuff falling out of the vent. That's the guy that's like, fuck, because he was right next to him at the time. He's like, fuck, like that could have been him.
Is he the same one when they were corralling it through the different hallways? He's like, this thing is really pissed off.
I think so. That might have been the same guy, but I don't fully remember who said that at the time. But it might have been him. But he was a pretty funny character, and he was likable, and he seemed to be actually trying to do something good, as opposed to a lot of the other people who were just sort of super evil, but they were afraid of the preacher guy.
So you're following the horror morals, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so jumping back down to the teen years, I'm guessing you participated in Halloween as a teen. You had mentioned that guy that hits Pikachu with a pan as being your last thing, so I'm guessing that was more done in the teen years. Did you have any favorite costumes in the teen years?
I kind of dropped out from super wearing costumes. I mean, I would wear something every now and again, but it would be just sort of slapped together.
Okay.
After I fell out of it, I became more along the lines of the guy who got into decorating and stuff like that than somebody putting on a costume.
What kind of decorations did you do?
Just, whatever. Whatever I could get my hands on.
Dead bodies, things on fire, skulls, lots and lots of skulls.
Let's just say I liked it to look very realistic.
Okay, then here's a question. You ever have the cops called on you for your decorations by mistake?
I have not. Thank goodness.
New life goals. Okay, so you had mentioned that you didn't have any friends or family or crew that were into horror, so we can skip that. Any reoccurring dreams in your teenage years?
No, reoccurring dreams are not something I had very much of. Only that one when I was younger. Okay. I had vivid dreams, but just nothing that came back to me again and again and again.
Okay. Anything?
Wait, there is one.
Yes.
There was this one where I was, and this was just a brief one, and it happened to me a number of times, where I was in an hourglass. I was inside of an hourglass, and I would slip off the top tier and fall down. And before hitting anything, I would wake up. That's it. That's about the only reoccurring one I had.
Slip off the top tier and fall down, as in like in the top container, and you would slip through to the bottom container?
Exactly, yeah. And then it was just darkness down there. It wasn't sand or anything. But the glass was just so slick, and I couldn't keep my footing, and I would always eventually fall down into the lower tier of the
something
hourglass.
That you were constantly running late for, that you were afraid you were going to run out of time on?
I have no idea.
I mean, the other thing that you said was the darkness at the bottom. That could also be something.
Yeah.
Anything in real life that scared you in your teenage years?
No, my teenage years were pretty bland. I had a pretty good amount of friends in my teenage years, so nothing really super bothered me. I did move a lot, but I was in that phase where you could make friends pretty easily still.
And then, so the next question doesn't kind of apply, which would have been, whether or not that affected you in any material way, but no. All right. So, so far, if we were to summarize before going into adult years, I think, the common themes that I'm hearing so far are monsters and coming and the fear of maybe what's within, coming to terms with it. Does that sound accurate so far?
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything that you would think is more accurate?
Yeah, my younger years were pretty much like you said. It's just coming to terms with this feeling that I was a monster and learning how to live with that and also better myself, even though I thought that lowly of myself.
And horror helped you do that in some way.
Horror was my escapism. Rather than be a serial killer, I could watch serial killers.
There you go. It's safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you didn't see it as like instructional in terms of how to help you not be that thing.
Yeah, no, I never really had the desire to go out and kill people. I kind of value life too much. But, when you're young and you're angry, you got to have some way to kind of blow off all that steam from all the bad stuff that's happened to you. And that sort of gave me the feeling of, that release sort of that I needed when I was angry about things.
Right. And I didn't necessarily mean it literally. I mean, more metaphorical, like you're saying about, not going out and killing people, but wanting to let off steam. Okay, jumping into adult years then. What were some of the scariest stories or books or movies that you've come across in your adult years?
Man, just nothing, after The Grudge and The Ring, nothing has super scared me.
Okay.
I never kind of recaptured that feeling of ominous terror from a movie. I enjoy horror movies like greatly still, but
so that's like the flip side of the coin. So let's talk about that then. What have you enjoyed in horror in your adult years?
Just a lot of different stuff that, as computer graphics become more prominent, I would say that I enjoy the more practical effects better.
Okay.
So I find myself watching a lot of more independent horror, like the movie The Void, or Psycho Goreman or whatever. Movies that, obviously they may still use some special effects, but there's a heavy focus on making things real. Mm-hmm. The blood is real. The monster effects are real and stuff. Because CG just doesn't have a lasting quality. Like, no matter how good it is, it's never good enough to be scary.
Like, real physical objects will still be real physical objects decades later, whereas, computer technology is outdated 2 weeks from now.
It's funny that you...
Yeah, I remember when
It's funny that you talk about, practical effects being more scary, but at the same time, you're saying it doesn't scare you. So maybe it's not that it scares you, but it's just more realistic, I guess.
It's more realistic, as it feels real. Like the CG feels like, you're playing a tabletop.
It breaks you out of the what's the word? Willing suspension of disbelief. It breaks you out of that.
CG is sort of like a tabletop game, whereas just like claymation was. Claymation would sort of take me out of it in the past too, a bit. Especially if it was done poorly. Yeah. Like, heaven help me with that scene in Hellraiser 2 with the fingers opening up. That looked terrible. And that brought me right out of feeling afraid of Mr. Dr. Kill or whatever his name was. But CG always kind of had that hollow sort of feeling to me, but then you have something like practical effects, and I would call that more like LARPing. It's like, it's real, it's physical. People are hitting each other with foam weapons. Of course, it's not real, but it's really there. People are really doing this to each other.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's not that I'm into LARPing. I would rather do tabletop gaming because, but
you understand it as an analogy.
Yeah, I understand it as an analogy. Right.
The first thing that popped into my head when you said that, though, was I think I saw some behind the scenes making of Braveheart when it was out. And they showed how in the battle scenes, they would use these large warhammers that were like just a huge rock on the end of a stick. And it was a giant piece of foam that they could soak the tip of in fake blood, so that they would just pummel somebody with this soft foam mallet and it would explode blood.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say that they were doing LARPing first to practice.
It kind of was. It was LARPing on camera,
Yeah.
Well, you got to do
running into different cycles, choreograph.
The dress rehearsal.
Oh, yeah. That too.
Without the blood in it, because then you don't want to ruin the costumes yet.
Yeah, or waste the blood. Shit's expensive.
Yeah. Okay, so you weren't scared by The Void or Psycho Goreman. It was more of a excitement or enjoyment.
Yeah.
Any others?
That's sort of how I view horror in general now. It's just enjoyable.
Okay.
Yeah. There are more real life things to be afraid of.
Yeah.
I'd like to dig more into the enjoyment of it. I'm thinking there might be a better descriptive word for the emotion that you feel other than
like riding a roller coaster.
Okay.
When you get on that roller coaster, you're probably going to be okay by the end of it, but it's still kind of a thrill to get on that roller coaster and ride it to the end. You're going to feel emotions. They're going to rise and fall. And then at the end of it, you get the release of being off of it, and you have the endorphins of feeling good from it.
Yeah. Like you say, it's even when you're riding a roller coaster, you're probably going to be okay. There is some small risk. Because things do sometimes happen on a roller coaster.
Yeah, and I would like to think, with movies, every now and again there might be something in there that might stick with me after it's all over. Maybe one day again I'll experience that fear, like from The Ring or The Grudge or whatever. And that's sort of the risk of watching a horror movie. Like, is this going to affect me deeply? And I, part of you is, you're braced for that because it has in the past, just like people have heard stories about roller coasters falling off the tracks and everyone dying.
So why do you want to feel that something again that you felt with The Grudge and The Ring?
Because it's a thrill. It's like, why do people skydive? It's like you might die, but at the same time, it's going to be a thrilling story to tell people at the end. Just like how I look back on, being scared to death of mirrors for an entire year. Like, that wasn't a small portion of my young life. I was terrified of mirrors. And now I look at it and I'm like, that was a fun time. Well, I got traumatized, but in the best possible way.
Right. It's a harmless trauma.
Yeah. I don't know if that one's come up or not, Steve. Bragging rights as a reason for being interested in anything horror? Like saying that you survived the terrifying experience?
Well, I was kind of separating two different things, and you guys might be putting them back together. When I said, why do you want to feel that way again? I didn't mean the feeling of the roller coaster and the possibility that you might feel a legitimate fear like he did with The Grudge or The Ring. I was talking about the legitimate fear that he felt with The Grudge and The Ring. Why would you want to feel that again?
Because as far as I know, it's survivable.
Right. And that kind of ties in with where that conversation did end up going. Like I say, it's
if I thought my life was going to be in any form of for real danger, then I probably wouldn't want to re-experience that. But because I've already experienced it a few times and survived, it's like, hey, I wouldn't mind feeling paranoid for a few months.
Okay.
Let's see where that road goes. It's kind of hard. I guess it's sort of a nostalgia thing, in a way. It's like you don't get that feeling many times in life, and when you do get it, it's kind of like something to be remembered, because generally you're going to, only have it for so long, and it's going to go away. And, so like in my life, how many times has that happened? Like 2 or 3 times, in 36 years. So not very often.
This is kind of reminding me of something. As you were talking about this, I was also thinking to myself that it's also kind of similar, at least, from my own perspective, being older now and feeling the same way, even about things like love. Like, remember when we were kids and the first time we fell in love, like love doesn't hit the same today as it did when we were 12, 13. And it reminded me of a quote by one of my favorite authors, Joseph Campbell, professor. And he said, and you can agree or disagree, but one of the things that he said that I liked was, a lot of people ask me about, what's the meaning of life, or say that they're looking for the meaning of life. And he said, I don't think people are looking for a meaning for life. I think what people are looking for is to experience the feeling of being alive.
Yeah.
And that kind of might tie back with that.
Yeah. See, the thing about me is I'm a little different. So experiencing emotion at all is a bonus for me. When you say love, for me, as somebody who's had kind of a jilted experience with emotions because of my rough upbringing and never being shown proper emotions, love to me is loyalty.
Right.
I've never experienced the goo-goo, my heart is pounding kind of love that maybe some other people have. I love my wife. I do. And, but when I say that, it's because I like her being around. I care for her. I care for our child. I would never want anything bad to happen to them, and I'm always going to be there for them. But I don't know that I've ever felt in my entire life for anybody. And I don't know if I'm capable of feeling what it is that people refer to as this head over heels in love thing that I've heard about, So the whole heart pounding and racing and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know. I just don't think I've ever experienced it. And maybe because I'm damaged, I I can't experience it, but I can do things the best I can. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I get what you're saying with that. I still kind of think it ties in though, because even if you're not feeling that emotion, there's this other emotion that you do feel when you watch those movies and you experience those things. And where that quote was going is saying that feeling anything is really the experience of being alive. You know, whether it's good or
maybe
bad.
that's why I'm so fond of horror, because it makes me feel something.
Yeah,
it could be. Just to ask a couple of the same questions here for adulthood, I'm guessing you no longer dress up for Halloween.
I do every now and again, but it's stupid stuff, you know. Like last year I was the business casual knight. I had a knight helmet and a great sword, and I was wearing business casual clothes. So.
Okay. That works. Yeah.
This year I didn't get to anything, unfortunately, but I did decorate pretty good.
Any least favorite costumes of the adult years?
They're all about the same.
Hate them all equally.
Well, in a year of lack of costumes but decorating, same situation here. I wonder, did you get any trick-or-treaters?
I never get trick-or-treaters. I always put out everything just because I enjoy the holiday, but nobody ever comes down my street. A raccoon did come and take all the candy though. So,
well, at least someone enjoyed it.
He was wearing a mask.
Yeah, I came out. So my camera in front of my house kept going off, the motion sensing camera. I'm like, what's going on? You know, it's like there's no children out there. So I like deactivated. I'm like, you're going crazy, right? Anyway, the next day I get up and I'm looking at the footage and you see this little dark mask reaching up, getting candy and like breaking the Halloween eggs open and eating the candy out of them.
It made somebody happy. Anything in your adult life that has legitimately scared you?
Oh yeah, there have been plenty of stuff in my adult life that's legitimately scared me. If you want to talk about like supernatural stuff,
sure.
There's one event that I talk to people about because this can be corroborated by a lot of different people. So in my adult life, the first place I owned was a trailer, and I got it from this Spanish family because my grandmother had kicked me out. So I bought this house from them, and me and my wife and my friend James all fixed this place up, so that way we could make it livable. I was living next to my friend James because he let us stay there after my grandmother kicked us out, and I got the place next to him and figured, hey, he's my good friend. I'll stay next to him, and we'll fix this place up, maybe sell it eventually, whatever. So we did fix it up, and the thing was, when we were staying with my friend James, one night we were all watching TV, and in the mirror that showed all of us, that was next to the television, we saw some black thing move behind us from in the room to out of the room. And we all verified. We were like, you guys saw that, right? There was like somebody wearing like black clothes that just moved behind us. So we all got up and we looked around the house. Nobody was in the house. And that was me, my wife, James, and his wife. And then the next time we had all our computers set up in one room. There's 4 computers. We were all in there doing our various computer things. And it walked right through the room. And we all saw it. Like
saw it in the mirror or saw it in real life?
No, we all saw it. Like a person walking through the room.
Wow.
Yeah. It was just a person walking through the room, a person wearing black rags. And so we started referring to him as the Rag Man. He has black hair, white skin. You can see this much detail, and black ragged trench coat. And after that, we thought it was pretty much over, right? So we went to the other place, we fixed it up. And then we started seeing him at the other place. And the more we saw him around, the worse our attitudes became. Mm-hmm. I didn't know if there was a correlation, if he was causing that or whatever the case was, but he was around more and we were getting in more and more of a foul mood. So we would just see him out of the corner of our eye. One time I saw him just standing in a room, all kinds of crazy stuff would just seeing him around would happen. And my friend James was a Wiccan, and he said, let me go in there. I know a cleaning ritual. Let me clean your house out, right? So he went in there and he went to go clean it out, and we went outside and waited. And he starts going from room to room, doing whatever he's doing. And then he comes outside. He comes outside and he's like holding his face. And we're like, what happened? And he's like, I went to go in your room and the door slammed on my face and nearly broke my nose. He says, I thought you were playing a joke on me, or if there was somebody else in the house. But he says, and the door was difficult to open and close. There's no way. There's no gust of air, no nothing that could do it. It was, the floor was not the correct height after we had to work on it. So it dragged on the floor a little bit. And he said that door slammed so hard in his face that it nearly broke his nose. So he gave up on trying to cleanse the house after that. A bit later, Eileen went over to her friend's house. It was a couple at the time. They weren't married yet. And she went to go use the restroom at their house. She had talked to them about the ragman, but didn't really give any specific details about him. When she came out of the bathroom, they looked shocked. And it was Steve and his girlfriend. And she's like, what's going on here? And they said, the ragman, does he look like this? And he described the ragman as we saw him, and apparently he walked through the house while Eileen was visiting them. And they were really freaked out by it. Anyway, shortly thereafter, we got away from the house. We got rid of the house, and we moved away from it. But that was a terrifying time, because when you're accustomed to dealing with spirits and stuff, here's the trick. You just open windows or doors or whatever, and you say, I want you to leave. Nobody wants you here. I don't have to be mean about this, but you need to leave because you're affecting us. Whatever the case is, you can ask or tell spirits to leave. And when you say earnestly and nobody else in the house is opposing that sentiment, generally the spirit will leave. Nothing we could do got rid of this thing. And that's a terrifying concept. So, when we moved, fortunately, it did not follow us. Once again, much like I said with the whole the grudge and the ring, this was a level of spirit I had never dealt with, and it was sort of the realization of they can be bad, and they can not leave when you ask them to. So
there is another side,
yeah. So that's the only time I've ever experienced anything quite like that. But it was terrifying.
Other than the door slamming, every other time you mentioned him, it sounded like he was just kind of either standing and hanging out or walking through a room. Was there any other things that was more interactive?
No, he was not. He was kind of hands off for the most part. I guess he just didn't want to be kicked out of the house.
Yeah, I was going to say, it kind of makes sense because your friend was doing a cleansing of the house, so it makes sense that he would have more of a reaction.
Yeah, he cleansed the whole house except for that room, and when he got to that room,
of course, was your bedroom.
Last place. Yeah, it was our bedroom. That was his last. Imagine that, it's our bedroom. I'm gonna be happy sleeping in there, right? But that was his last area that needed to be cleansed, and he injured the person going to cleanse the room. So, but the
normal follow-up question to, if anything actually terrifying has ever happened in a particular phase of your life, is to ask, has that affected your present life in any way? It sounds like you said that you moved away, and it doesn't sound like anything lasting has happened due to that.
Yeah, no. It was a bad time over there. But once I realized that the world could be normal again and this thing was going to leave us alone, you can only be scared for so long about stuff. And, frankly, I've experienced so much trauma in my life that it's like, I could get over that. If I could get over the actual real world things that have physically affected me and stuff, I can get over that pretty easy.
Okay. The real world stuff you're talking about there is stuff we've already talked about, or other stuff that you wanted to add?
Yeah, it's just family stuff, just bad parenting and bullies and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Nothing overly, complicated, just what a lot of people have probably experienced in their lives. It's like, I don't know. Like I said, that's why I always tried to be better in my life, because I was never given better. So, when you have parents that make your life harder and try to tell you you're retarded and all this kind of stuff, like my mother would literally tell me to lie to people on tests to make it look like I was dumber than I was, because she wanted me to fit some kind of mold that she had for me. And my dad was ultra religious and I wasn't, and that didn't please him. So therefore I never got the easy end of the spectrum with him either, because I consider myself a Christian, but I would never be one that's good enough to be what he wanted me to be in life. So, that's why I don't push anything on my daughter. I'm going to let her be the person she grows up to be and just give her the best possible start.
Right.
Nice.
That's good. So coming into the home stretch here, the last couple questions that we like to ask, these are not related to horror specifically or any particular time in your life. They're more overall questions. And I'm going to give you two questions at the same time, because the answer could be the same or could be different answers. But the two questions are, what would you say is your favorite movie, and what movie have you watched more times than any other?
Because I have such a deep bond with the Tetsuo film series, I would say all three of those movies, or if I had to choose one, it would be the first one.
Okay.
Just because it got me through a hard time in my life. It helped me understand that there are other people out there who experience something like what I've been through, and it helped me cope with my reality at the time.
Okay.
So that would probably be my favorite film. And probably the one I've watched the most. That's difficult. Probably The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. I've watched that movie so many times because it's just such a good movie, and you could have it on in the background or whatever. And it's good entertainment, and it's comforting for some reason. It's a comforting movie to have on.
Yeah, it's got that nostalgia feel to it.
Is that why it's comforting for you, or?
I mean, I'm not rooting for the monster, the thing to win, but it's like the way I view that movie is like a cup of cocoa,
Yeah.
like just warm cocoa. That's how I think of that movie for some reason. It's not my favorite John Carpenter movie, but it's the one that I, if I'm going to just pop something on, that's probably going to be my go-to film. I never get tired of it. So that's one thing too. I never watched that movie and I'm like, oh, it's this movie again. I don't know how it can do that. I've never, but somehow it manages to have not bored me after 36 years. You know?
Yeah. Do you see any common threads about what kind of horror you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical,
paranormal,
monsters,
body horror. I really enjoy body horror, and you could see that from Tetsuo the Iron Man. Body horror everywhere in that movie. You could see that from The Thing. I enjoy the body horror in that movie. Like if you say body horror, you got my attention.
Have you seen Possessor?
I haven't seen Possessor yet. Is there good body horror in that film?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I got to check it out. I thought that was just sort of like like The Matrix, but like with a killer. I was under the impression that was what the film was like.
It's more like John Malkovich meets Inception meets murdering people meets Cronenberg.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out.
So what is it like that you like about the body horror more than the monsters?
It's more impactful.
Okay.
It's more grotesque that something is actually happening to somebody rather than something gruesome is chasing somebody,
Right? Like it's more personal because you see it happen to a body.
Okay.
Like what if that happened to me kind of thing.
I think I know the answer to this one anyway, but I'll ask anyway and let you answer. Do you have any idea why it is that you like those things?
I guess it would have to do with my view of myself as a monster.
How does the body horror tie in with you being a monster?
Well, it's like a disease, you feeling that way, like you're a demon, and the best you can do in life is to try and overcome your own nature to do good. And it's like a disease that's on you, and that you always have to treat, you know.
Hmm.
So it's very metaphysical in that sense, I guess. But, you know, it's like when you've been told your whole life that you're bad and all you've done is seek to do good. And it's like, it's almost like this badness clings to you and it's like a disease. The fact that you even consider yourself a monster in the first place, you know.
That's a good assessment, I guess you could say. I was actually going in a different direction, but kind of going back to something you mentioned earlier. You had mentioned that body horror is more grotesque, and I thought that was going to tie in with what you said about seeking something that's going to make you feel something. But I could see it both ways, that maybe there's these two things in conjunction that both bring you to liking body horror.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's like I said, with horror in general, it's really just about that thrill ride, making me feel, you know, whatever.
Okay. One of the, down to the last two questions here. The second to last one is there anything else that could trigger those kinds of emotions? And if so, then why do you prefer horror? And where I'm going with that is, in your case, I don't know, because I'm thinking about, the monster part of it, but in terms of strong emotions, other examples that we've given in the past are things like, action movies like Cliffhanger. If you're looking for thrills, there are other ways to get thrills than horror. Or if you're looking for intelligence, good writing, sometimes sci-fi, you could get that. Or strong emotions could also be rom-coms, depending on what you're into. But, what is it that you're getting out of horror that you don't feel you get out of other genres? You know what I mean?
I can relate to living a nightmare.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like I said, it's almost like an escapism for me. When you've lived and you've suffered abuse and bullying and all these terrible things, and being constantly told that you're less than everyone else,
right,
your whole life, and then you want to be better. But you have this stigmatism that it's you. You go into like a horror movie, and it's just, you feel it almost like a manifestation of, yourself. And that's why in a lot of cases you almost root for the, dumbass teen to be chopped into pieces or whatever, because it's like, that's a satisfaction that, you've never been able to feel yourself, because you're not, I know people who have lived in situations less bad than mine that have gone on to be terrible people who have done terrible things, but once again, good and bad, it all comes down to the choices you make.
Yeah. It's not what happened to you, it's what you do with it.
Exactly. It's the lessons you take away from it. But doesn't hurt to get a little stress relief by having some snotty kid get chopped up in a horror movie. That's not going to hurt anyone. You getting some enjoyment out of it.
Vengeance isn't a word that has come up until this moment.
Yeah, I wouldn't personally. I wouldn't seek revenge on anyone or anything like that. I'm about letting everything go and letting the past lie.
But seeing someone else get vengeance is entertaining.
Yes, exactly. Seeing somebody else do that is, see, this is two vastly different aspects of my personality, the indulging in horror and the fantasy and stuff like that. But then there's the real me who, I'm actually a very chill person, and, I'm not into getting revenge, and, life's too short to be angry about stuff. So I just try to move on with everything that has happened to me, and I don't dwell on it. I got a life now, a family, I got responsibility, I got dreams and hopes that I'm chasing, and all of that is bigger than anything that I went through in the past. But
on the other hand,
I like to feed that beast every now and again by dipping into a horror movie and let myself go,
Yeah, it's vicarious schadenfreude.
There you go. I couldn't have said it better myself.
There's an author named Robert Bly that I watched an interview with once, where he was talking about desire, and how, for, at least in his experience, part of being an adult is recognizing that often there is some sort of desire that an individual has that will never be, I don't want to say satiated. That's not really the right word, but resolved. And the desire is different for every person, but coming to terms with understanding that there's this thing that I want and it's never going to happen. And it's okay. But just the grappling with that and successfully grappling with it, that it defines their capacity to be an adult, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's part of the growing process. Just like there's a, early childhood development. There are also, and it doesn't get talked about a lot, but there's also adult development too. And this is part of it.
Exactly. Yes. I couldn't have said it better.
Last question. Considering the theme of the podcast, is there anything relevant that you're aware of that we haven't asked about or we haven't talked about?
Not really. I mean, I don't think about myself that much. So even if there was something that got brushed over, I wouldn't.
No, but I mean, if there was something that came up in your mind as we were talking, but you didn't get a chance to say.
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, all part of this too could be, the manifestation of things could be, I wanted to be specifically a horror movie director. And maybe that could be a manifestation of my creativity and the things I felt like I actually want to get my hands into that world and create my own work of horror and get that out so people can understand part of me that's hidden deep down. A part of me that will never surface in reality, but could come out in the work of my creation. So, I don't think we broached that subject, but that's why I like doing these short horror films. And I'm actually currently working on a comic book that I'm going to eventually get out if I get the funding.
Actually, it's funny that you brought that up because that has come up in other calls. At least my personal view is that our interests in being creators, whether it's director, producer, writer, artist, I almost feel like the desire for the artist is almost secondary to all the things that we've talked about, because the things that we've talked about are like the ground level, the base foundation that everything else is built on. And then if you then want to be an artist, because that part is, I don't want to say it's optional or a choice, but it doesn't always happen. Not everybody becomes an artist, but if you do become an artist and you want to create things off of that foundation, it's still coming up off of the foundation of the stuff that we've talked about. So you're right. I didn't address your desires as an artist. Honestly, that was intentional. We didn't spell it out. But that's why.
Yeah, definitely. It's a sum, that's why they say like tortured artists and stuff like that, because a lot of art is derived from, our experiences and our desire to express ourselves and be understood on a sort of a deeper level, much like what Shinya Tsukamoto did. Right. You see, it all comes back to him.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've enjoyed, at least about these conversations that we've had, is, and I don't know how much of what we've talked about, it sounds like you were fairly up to speed on your influences and the things that you've obviously lived through in your own life. But, there are people that we've talked to that, we've gone through this kind of interview process. And at the end of it, they're like, you know what, I didn't really realize how much these things impacted my direction in life. In your case, it sounds like you do, which is cool. And the other reason that we're doing this is to try to create sort of a database. To have good data, you have to have a large sample size, but to understand why people like horror, you got to talk to a lot of people and come to their particular reasons. And in your case, it sounds like, if we're going to summarize the call, it was, like you were saying about, seeking to do better and be better, coming to terms with your past and the things potentially that could be inside of you or could be inside of anybody, in your goal to be better. And then there are other things that also, I think, kind of tie in with that, like your artistry and the body horror and also your desire for anything that you were saying, enables you to feel a strong emotion again, but it also ties back into the same kinds of things. So I think we got a pretty good answer for you. I hope you would agree.
Yeah. No, I think that about covers it.
Well, good. Well,
I had a good time talking to you guys.
Yeah, likewise.
So I'll go ahead and jump right into the closing. Thank you, and thank all the listeners out there. Please do come visit us at horrormakesushappy.com. We've got a list of people there that we have interviewed, people we'd like to interview. If you can get us in touch with any of those people, please do. If you want to see somebody added to the list, let us know. There are links to our social media pages on there. We're also going to have a bio for Ashen Jackal here and on the page, and we'll link to a couple things for him. Just come let us know how we're doing. horrormakesushappy.com.
Oh, and congrats to the contest winners.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I almost forgot. Let's see. Rachel Venn and Danielle Eduardo, I believe it's pronounced, were the winners of our Halloween contest. Yay, Halloween contest.
Woo!